Hey, real quick, just a reminder to subscribe to the channel. That'd be great. Also, we're doing a live show in Atlanta, December 2nd, the Friday night before the SEC championship game, solidverballive.com. Link down there for tickets.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal Boys and Girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrandt. That fine gentleman over there. The heart
I'm
of the
also Ty
Midwest.
Hildenbrandt. No, sorry.
Dan Rubenstein.
I jumped all over you, Ty.
Dan Rubenstein. You know, you make jokes like that, and you know what happens. It snows in Chicago.
I know.
How you dealing with that?
I had to run outside this morning in the snow. And when I work from home, obviously, and so I just wear shorts and a t-shirt all day. We have a little bit of heat in our house, so I don't go over the top in wearing warm clothes, even if it's frigid out, unless I'm outside. I had to run out and cover my pizza oven with the cover. I was like, oh no! I had forgotten to do that last night. But otherwise, I'm fine. I'm just chilling inside.
It's a pleasure to have everybody here with us. This episode, all of our episodes, driven by our good friends over at Geico. We would encourage you, if you're going to be in the Atlanta area, December the 2nd, it's a Friday evening, the night before the SEC title game. Maybe you're an LSU fan traveling in from out of town. Maybe you're a Georgia fan. You already live in the greater Atlanta area. Maybe you're just a college football fan. You don't have a rooting interest in any of the games, but you're just a college football fan. You're a verballer all the same. SolidVerbalLive.com. We're doing a live show at Terminal West. We were just talking about it before we hit record. We're both very excited about this next batch of 2 shows that we've got coming up. One in Atlanta on the 2nd, and then January the 7th out in LA if you're going to be out on the West Coast. But tickets are going pretty quick. We would urge everybody, SolidVerbalLive.com, get them while you can, because if you wait like another week or so, they might be all gone.
Yeah. Limited quantity left, and we're going to find a place to watch the Pac-12 championship game right after. Oh, man. You're
going to be in rare form for that.
I mean, if Oregon's even there, they might eliminate themselves before that even happens, but I want to watch the game all the same. A lot of good eating options in the area. It's right by the Georgia Tech campus, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that. Right by the Georgia Tech campus. So a lot of good eating options, drinking options. It's going to be a hell of a time as we induct all sorts of 2022 things into our very customized Hall of Fame. And there's not a dress code for you, but there will be for us.
We have to get the jacket situation sorted.
There will be formal wear on stage. Wear whatever you want. I mean, you can check Terminal West guidelines for what they'll allow you in wearing, but I can't wait. SolidVerbalLive.com. This is going to be above and beyond. You got to get here. SolidVerbalLive.com.
On today's show, we're going to play a little game we like to call the home stretch game, Dan.
Yeah.
We will get to that in a little bit. We also have a special guest.
We do.
We have taken an interest over the years in just talking with people who are either college football adjacent or college football curious, just to get the deal on their fandom, right?
What a phrase, college football curious. I love that.
However intense or not intense they are about college football, just we like getting folks' story as it relates to college football. We're going to hear from Chris Distefano a little bit later. Chris Distefano has a Netflix comedy special right now called Speshy Weshy. You can go on his website at chrisdcomedy.com and see if he will be on tour near you. We talked to Chris for about 20 minutes or so. Had a good conversation. It was a lot of fun. So Chris will be by a little bit later. We're going to play our game. Before we do, though, Dan, I do want to get into a couple news hits. And I don't mean to bring the mood down here. I'm not going to play my sound.
No, it's good.
For obvious reasons, but a horrible tragedy at the University of Virginia. The news broke on Sunday night / Monday morning that a former football player was suspected of killing 3 football players and wounding 2 others on campus. The suspect is in custody. He was listed as a freshman running back on the 2018 roster. Christopher Darnell Jones Jr. 3 football players were shot and killed, sadly. Lavelle Davis Jr., Devin Chandler, Deshaun Perry. Jones has been arrested, charged with 3 counts of second-degree murder, 3 counts of using a handgun with commission of a felony. This is horrible news. You know, I mean, we sit here, we read this stuff off, and it's still sort of surreal. to see it in print and to read the comments, not just of players, but coaches, administrators. A horrible thing that transpired at UVA. I hope everybody is dealing with this as best they can. And if you're a UVA fan, or even if you're not, like,
right.
I don't even know what to say. This is the worst kind of thing that we have to talk about on this show.
It is. It's completely gutting. We're talking about, in the grand scheme of things, kids. We're absolutely talking about people with their entire lives ahead of them, taken in the most senseless way. And I saw the story, and it took my breath away. Like, yeah. I don't know how you can react any other way, where it's just, you think about, why, the overarching reason why so many people play football, and the brotherhood that comes with being on a team. And, you share so much time and effort, and, that is, the old cliche of blood, sweat, and tears. And to have it end like this for these three young men is just, man, I don't have the words. It's just that it's so crushing to see something like this. So certainly our hearts and thoughts are with everybody within the Virginia football program, the university, and anybody affected by this.
Absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
Monday mornings for us usually are kind of a mad dash to collect everything that we need for the week ahead. But you see news like this, and it's just sort of, you sit back in your chair and shake your head. I mean, it's really, really painful. So, yeah,
it can be easy, Ty, to sort of look at, what are the matchups this week? What are the lines this week? What are the advanced stats saying? Let's go watch, a bunch of, clips and games and rewatch stuff we missed in the weekend. And you're like, just floored by something like this, where you're like, oh, right. Like, this is absolutely real life in your face.
Keeps it all in perspective. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely horrible. We send our best to the Virginia family. That's, again, kind of without words. Elsewhere in college football, not to make too awkward of a transition over to the less important stuff, but we did have some movement in the administrator/coaching realm of things. West Virginia parted ways with Shane Lyons, who's been their athletic director since 2015. That, of course, is notable because of the football team. Neil Brown, Neil Brown has not had an easy go of things in his time in Morgantown. It would seem as if the writing is on the wall that he may be on the way out, but there has been no comment issued from the school as to which direction they might head. But this is not a good sign for him. The only other bit of news I have kind of on that coaching/administrator level, Cal fired Bill Musgrave, who was their offensive coordinator, in addition to Angus McClure, their offensive line coach. Cal's offense has, of course, been lagging, not just this year. It's been a couple years running now that it's been lagging, but they decided to make this move now. We shall see what more comes of this. Obviously, as we get deeper into November, Dan, that's when we get the silly season with coaches. That's when we start to hear a lot about this. Excuse me. And this becomes a little bit more of a talking point for us. But for now, relatively quiet with a few notable exceptions.
Yeah, and the West Virginia Athletic Department is certainly one, and just West Virginia sports in general has had a good deal of success. Big picture, when you look at the revenue sports, obviously a high-profile basketball coach, Bob Huggins. Football, the transition to the Big 12 has been sort of topsy-turvy, up and down seasons, and the Neil Brown era has not lived up to, I think, expectations given his success level at Troy and inability to figure out offense, inability to figure out quarterback, which is his specialty, Neil Brown. And so I saw Rob Mullins, the athletic director at Oregon's name in the mix. I have no idea how serious that is because he is an alum of West Virginia. So obviously his name has come up for a number of high-profile jobs, and West Virginia's no exception. And yeah, you're absolutely right that, look, we've already seen coaches fired very early on, but now it's going to be picking up, especially in the shadow of rivalry week and bigger games near the end of the season where, like, hey, you got to beat X. If you're coach of Y, you got to beat X. And if you can't do that again, I think we're going to make a decision, and we're going to find those funds to to buy out. So yeah, as we enter into, well, we got Thanksgiving a couple weeks away. As we enter to this portion of the year, this is where you're going to see a lot of tweets that start with breaking :
Yep.
Yeah, that's the reality.
The sleepless nights for our friends Bruce Feldman and Pete Thamel and Nicole Auerbach. They will be very, very busy over the next couple weeks as this thing cranks up and cranks down throughout the remainder of the college football season. That's all I have in the news department, Dan.
Yeah.
Do we want to play our home stretch game?
I would love to, Ty.
Love it.
All right, so many teams have only a couple games left. If I'm looking at this correctly, Ty, 2-3 games left, mostly
Correct.
2 games left.
Correct.
In week 12, so we've got games coming, I want to say the 18th. Am I doing my math correctly? 19th?
Yeah.
And then it's Thanksgiving rivalry week, and then it's conference championship week. So yes, there are situations like Army, Navy, of course, to come after that, which are incredible games. But we're going to take, 4 or 5 teams here, and we're going to look at their home stretch, the schedule ahead, and how we feel like they are entering into that last straightaway of the season. That, of course, was the music from the seminal Nintendo classic Rad Racer.
Rad Racer.
Which is an especially 90s name for a Nintendo game.
Anytime you use the word rad, that screams 90s.
Yeah. I also want to say that in my mind, there was probably a Japanese version of that game called like Fierce Speed. And then it was brought to a marketing table at, I don't know where Nintendo of America was located. Something tells me Seattle, but I have no idea. And they're like, all right, Fierce Speed is pretty good, but it is 1993. And we do want to really get after the kids. How about, I don't know, what are we talking rad speed? We talking funky curves? Like what is, and then Rad Racer. I like Rad Racer. And here we are.
That was in the heyday of Pogs and Slammers.
Oh yeah, of course.
A little riff at the end really slaps.
Pretty good.
Like
All right, so we are going to discuss how a few teams are entering that home stretch. Of these teams, Ty, where should we begin?
Start with USC.
Let's start with USC.
USC is in an interesting spot, frankly. They remain the highest ranked Pac-12 team.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how things go down the stretch, USC could have a claim to one of those playoff spots. I don't know if it's likely. I think they would need some help. But right now, as it stands, at least atop the Pac-12, you've got 3 teams competing for 2 spots to play and win the conference, right? That's where things stand. That's the lay of the land.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, they're in a good position with a couple of tough games. I think they have 3 games left. 2 games left. They just beat Colorado. They have UCLA and Notre Dame, UCLA on the road, Notre Dame at home to finish out the season. Each of those teams difficult in their own specific ways, but USC in a very good position to keep ascending and, if nothing else, find themselves in the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess within the framework of this game, we're trying to rate the home stretch. The game this week against UCLA, and we'll talk more about this on the show that drops tomorrow, it feels like a toss-up to me. These teams are very, very even with subtle differences.
Mm-hmm.
So that one I could go either way on. USC right now favored by about 2.5, 3 points. That feels about right to me. That feels about right. The Notre Dame game is interesting on a different level.
Okay.
Whereas I think UCLA, though oriented so much around the ground game, poses a threat to USC. UCLA doesn't have the defense. They don't play defense. Notre Dame does. And so I am very curious if we get to this game next weekend, already a rivalry game, Notre Dame on the road, probably at night against USC. I'm curious if Notre Dame's able to run a similar offense to what they did against Clemson. And if they're able to just beat USC's brains in with their ground assault.
Jeez, okay.
I'm curious to see if that's something Notre Dame can pull off. They definitely want to limit possession. They do not want to give the ball to Caleb Williams more than they have to. But that to me seems like it could be a even quieter, tough game for USC totally separate from this UCLA game this weekend. That's not even taking into account what might happen if they play a team like an Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. Oregon will be favored by a couple points, I'm assuming, in that one. Neutral site, probably pretty low point spread, maybe about a field goal, something like that. But this is still a tough road for USC. Like, they got a lot of their easy games out of the way earlier in the season. And now as they close out, we're going to find out what they're made of.
Totally agree. And I think USC is entering the home stretch of the season, to use my strain metaphor. Lot of speed, absolute lot of speed. Brakes are not fully working. The defense hasn't been solved. And, if there's weird wind on the track or something like that, I don't know if USC is capable of adjusting and using various strategies. I don't think the grip is all that great on their tires. They've opted for more speed than control at this point. But yeah, I think it's fascinating. Those two teams that they have left in UCLA and Notre Dame posing very different problems. You can count on the UCLA offense and you can count on the Notre Dame defense. And now with USC down Travis Dye, who's out for the season, still have guys at running back, notably a really promising freshman there in terms of burst and big playability. But there is still something about that inability to get stops on the ground. And maybe they get healthier at linebacker. Obviously, when they get healthier at receiver, that mitigates some of the issues because you can simply outscore a number of teams when you have Jordan Addison and Mario Williams lining up for Caleb Williams. But that is a worry point for me, that they're going to have to win in multiple ways. They're going to have to beat Notre Dame probably by not scoring 47 points. I don't think Notre Dame's going to give up that number of points to USC. And they're going to have to beat UCLA by at some point getting Zach Charbonnet to the ground. Yeah. And so this will test the versatility of what USC has left. But I still think if you are UCLA looking at the Trojans, if you are Notre Dame looking at the Trojans, you are still probably, pending wide receiver health, more worried about USC than they are about you.
I think that's totally fair. Absolutely
You
fair.
are probably more concerned with, you are spending more nights lying awake like, how the hell do we confuse Caleb Williams and get a stop?
Well, and for different reasons.
Yes.
For totally different reasons. I mean, both want to run the ball on the ground. I don't think UCLA is quite as dependent on it, given their quarterback situation. DTR is a hell of a lot better than Drew Pine.
Yes, agree.
So your concern isn't so much on that side of the ball, but on the UCLA front, we saw UCLA against Oregon. They couldn't stop Bo Nix. They've had a really hard time stopping the pass this year. That does not bode well at all for UCLA in this game, having to basically go into this one assuming it's going to be a shootout if they're going to win it all. If you're Notre Dame, you definitely feel better about your defense and its ability to contend with USC, but still it's a matter of limiting possessions because I don't know how many points you can truly count on from this offense. So I agree. It's there for USC too. By the way, keep this in mind about the Trojans. Not to get too far ahead of myself here, we're going to talk again a little bit more about this as we get into the preview show tomorrow, but USC's in a really interesting spot where they could finish with a couple wins over top 25 teams. And again, not to say that they've got the strongest case to jump up into the playoff, but LSU's probably going to lose. Got to assume that either Ohio State or Michigan's going to lose. Depends on how much they lose by. But we could come to a situation here in the not too distant future where USC's one loss is to a top 10 Utah by 1 point on the road.
Yeah, on the road. Yep.
It's not a bad place to be, Dan.
No, not at all. And if you are going to, in this hypothetical, look ahead to a potential Pac-12 championship game, be it against Utah if they beat Oregon and finish out strong, which if they're beating Oregon, they're probably going to finish out strong. Beat against Oregon. And Oregon's a big wild card question mark right now because of Bo Nix's health at the time we're recording this and his center, his All-American caliber center, Alex Forsyth. We're recording this Tuesday, November 15th at 11:44 a.m., just to put a timestamp on this Central Time. And if you're USC, you have to like what you didn't see from the Oregon defense. But still, if you're Oregon, you probably like what you haven't seen from the USC defense all the same. If those are the two teams meeting up in Vegas, USC obviously has a better concept of what to expect from Utah having faced them. And it seems like the UCLA thing will play itself out, obviously, with UCLA getting the L at home against Arizona this past weekend. So, it's the Pac-12 is easily the wild cardiest conference championship situation as we look ahead. So that's great. That's great for USC. It's a good year if you are the Trojans to have very little in the way of defense, because you can still win the conference without it right now. Yeah.
It's 100% true. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go over to Michigan.
Let's
go over to Michigan. Michigan, undefeated, 10-0, to close out the season right now with the home game this week against Illinois, the road game next week, rivalry week, the big one, against Ohio State. How they do in that game against Ohio State will depend on whether or not they go through to the Big Ten championship game. Right now, it looks as if Purdue is the most likely to come out of the West, but frankly, of all the teams coming out of the West, I don't know if any of them scare me in a hypothetical against Michigan. Michigan will be a healthy favorite in all of those. So for all intents and purposes, it is the next 2 weeks for the Wolverines, which feels okay to me. Like, I don't know. They beat Ohio State last year. That's clearly going to be the big game that they're worried about. But I do think that there is some sense in sticking with a very familiar game plan. It's worked really well all season. They haven't really been challenged that much. No. So if you go into that Ohio State game, if you start off trying to do what you did really successfully last season, you've got the stable of running backs to pull it off. You've got one of the best lines in the country to pull it off. It doesn't seem to me like that game plan has to be a whole lot different. The counterpoint, of course, is that Ohio State's loaded on offense, and you got to be able to score with them. You got to be able to stop them. But Michigan's got a pretty good defense as well. So, if you're a Michigan fan, if you know that your season, your opportunities all stem from that Ohio State game, that's sort of the way you want it, right? You want that game to be meaningful, and you want to beat your biggest rival in order to unlock the next level of the season.
Totally true. In the way that I'm worried about Notre Dame if I'm a USC fan, because Notre Dame has nothing to lose but just play spoiler and just be evil side of the rival for USC in this situation. Same could be true of Illinois at this point in the manner in which they've lost. I see very few universes in this parallel universe world in which Illinois beats Michigan at this point because of what we really haven't seen from their offense these last couple of weeks. And now Chase Brown is beat up, and he is the offense. All due respect to Tommy DeVito, but Chase Brown is not the heartbeat. You got to write off Illinois' offense to a pretty dramatic degree. Illinois can go in and say, screw it. We're going to muck this game up. We're going to limit every single possession to, they're going to do everything they can when they're on offense to slow the game down and make Michigan methodically beat them. And J.J. McCarthy has been good at times, but also this offense is a little bit prone to, we'll just kick a field goal here, which plays it like, we joke about Mario Cristobal and Gorilla Ball. There is definitely that element to what Brett Bielema wants to do with this team.
My problem with Illinois, and I don't want to give the game away too much. We're going to talk about this tomorrow. But
totally.
Let me just leave it at this. I do question the strength of that defense, the actual strength of that defense.
Okay, fair enough.
And
because of the schedule, they should perform as they have.
Yeah. That doesn't take anything away from what they've done. It doesn't mean that it's not a good defense against better teams. It could very well be. But we haven't seen enough data to really suggest that they're going to hold down Michigan in that way. So I agree with you. Look, we've been talking about that game for a while now as a potential landmine. It is a look-ahead spot for Michigan.
It's a total look-ahead spot, of course.
So there are reasons that I think we'd bring it up. But okay, let's go over to North Carolina.
Which, by the way, if I'm going to do my analogy here for the home stretch.
Oh, please.
I see Michigan as a little bit timid passing other cars. I see them as a little bit timid that they are structurally very sound. The engine is in a good place. The driver has a really good feel for the car. But there is something about, is this the moment? Is that the moment? Is this where I make my big move? And maybe that's the red zone stuff. Maybe that's J.J. McCarthy hesitating a little bit too much or trying to do too much and overthinking things at times. That'd be my analogy in this home stretch against Ohio State, where everything has to be such instinct and everything has to be so automatic, engine term, that's my worry, is picking the spot and just going through it with the accelerator. Well, that would be my home stretch analogy.
If we're going to move over to North Carolina and make a home stretch analogy, this is the guy that I saw when I was driving up in Allentown the other day.
Okay.
Who blew through a red light in the turning lane and then was driving in the wrong lane of traffic, swerved into another turning lane, just decided he wanted to go straight, and he found any way to do so without crashing into other cars, pedestrians, telephone poles, or whatever else. There's definitely a haphazard quality to North Carolina this season, given the fact that they basically don't play defense. They basically don't play defense. It is just all gas, no brakes. Whatever the offense can do, that's what they end up with. Now,
they've gotten better.
They've gotten better, yes.
The brakes have a little bit more give.
They've gotten a little bit better on the defensive side of the ball compared to where they were earlier in the season.
Mm-hmm.
It was catastrophic earlier in the season, Dan.
Of course.
They've definitely improved on that level. Still not great. Still not great per the SP Plus. I'm looking at it right now. 110th, not great. But that's better. That's still way better than they were at the start of the season. North Carolina is interesting to me because of that offense, because of Drake May. As we said on the recap show, Drake May 5-1 right now to win the Heisman Trophy. He has been sensational. His first year starting as quarterback, he has been absolutely sensational. Closes out the year with 2 home games, Georgia Tech and NC State. And then the ACC championship game, right? I mean, they're going to go to the ACC championship game, probably against Clemson. And that will be a fun as hell game to watch.
It's not probably. That's the game.
It is the game.
Yeah. North Carolina's playing Clemson. Yeah.
That will be fun as hell.
Yeah.
Fun as hell to watch. And I eagerly await what Drake May can do in a big spot on a big stage against a team like a Clemson. But Georgia Tech and NC State, Tech's been okay since getting rid of Jeff Collins, better than expected, but I'm not too worried about them going toe-to-toe and scoring with North Carolina. And NC State's kind of a hot mess, too. With Devin Leary out, I like MJ Morris. I'm rooting for him. They've got a decent enough defense, but the offense continues to sputter. It sputtered last week. So I just don't think we can take any of those, as for granted as a huge challenge that North Carolina is going to have to face here down the stretch.
NC State currently on a Boston College losing streak. Am I reading this correctly?
21-20. They lost last week, yeah.
Games in Chapel Hill. Am I reading that correctly?
You are.
It is a smooth road. It's not too slick. It's not too rocky. The home stretch for North Carolina with arguably, at the moment, the most talented on-field driver in the game. Your Max Verstappen type tie. I don't know if you understand that name.
I get
at
it.
all.
I get it.
Okay. You're Charles Leclerc. Sergio Perez. I'm just naming F1 drivers. I don't know why. Carlos Sainz. I think North Carolina is going to win these next 2. They also have Georgia Tech, correct?
Yes, Georgia Tech, NC State.
Is that in Chapel Hills or in
both
Atlanta?
Home. Both home.
Both home. Yeah, North Carolina. You mentioned the defense thing, and maybe that is, a very specific mechanic, Gene Chizik, accidentally leaving a Pop-Tart in the engine. Other than that, though, I don't see Georgia Tech's offense, and I certainly don't see NC State's offense at the moment posing a big threat unless Drake May takes his eyes off the road, something like that. So it is a smooth drive through the checkered flag of the regular season. Clemson, though, obviously poses an enormous challenge. But at this point, if you're North Carolina, you fire your defensive coordinator after last season, you make a change there, you turn to youth at quarterback, and you lose the 2 big running backs these last couple of years. I just think it was an incredible race because it's not how you start, as we know, it's how you finish. So we can look at some of the flaws and the flies in the ointment early on, but yes, it was rocky terrain. Maybe they popped a couple tires along the way, but they've very quietly gotten back into a tremendous position to win this race.
An 11-1 regular season's a hell of a way to finish out even if you end up losing Clemson. Clemson's
Yeah.
gettable, by the way. We saw that. But, 11-1 for North Carolina would be a really nice campaign, even given where the defense has been. Speaking of checkered flags, Dan, let's go over to Tennessee.
Yes.
You want to talk about a smooth road. 2 road games, mind you, but at South Carolina, at Vandy to close out the season.
Woo!
Yeah. Heavy favorites in both of those. Obviously this week over South Carolina. Obviously next week over Vanderbilt as well. They're going to be favored by like 30 points in that Vandy game. So,
and maybe then, in the South Carolina game as well.
Yeah. And then the other caveat is that Tennessee doesn't have to worry about playing the SEC title game because they lost to Georgia. They don't have to worry about any other stumbling blocks. They could potentially just blow out South Carolina and Vandy and then just sit around, take a bye week, and wait to see if they make it into the playoff, which kind of seems probable at this point, depending how things go in front of them, around them. Tennessee stands, I think, to gain an awful lot from whatever goes down in that Ohio State-Michigan game. At a minimum, TCU could lose this week. Right? We'll find out. But
totally,
Tennessee, I think, is probably in the best spot of all.
Yeah, Tennessee, essentially, at this point, a little bit of autopilot going on, right? I don't know how comfortable you are when you're on road trips, throwing the car into autopilot.
Not very.
Just kicking back and eating some peanut M&Ms and some popcorn chicken. No. There is an autopilot nature. All due respect to the job Shane Beamer has done and Clark Lee has done at their respective schools. Tennessee is behind 3 cars vying for 2 spots in the straightaway. They're coming around the curve. They're 3 wide, and there's only room for 2. And somebody's going to spin out, and Tennessee is right there to assume position. So Tennessee's in a terrific place right now. Obviously, getting that bounce-back performance, granted against Mizzou, but not a terrible Mizzou defense. In fact, quite the opposite, a pretty decent Mizzou defense to perform like they did. And they are the actual all-gas, no-brakes team when things are not, finding themselves against Georgia on the same field. They're that actual team. They kept pouring it on. They've kept pouring it on against no matter who they've played in the SEC outside of Georgia. I've come away so crazy impressed with Tennessee's very specific vision and strategy and identity, and that's important in a race like this, especially when you're just drafting. You're just drafting, something's going to go wrong on the track ahead of you, and you just got to keep moving forward. That's it.
Final team here before we get to our guest of honor.
Yes.
Texas. Let's talk about a little bit about Tejas, Dan.
Yeah.
Texas is 6-4 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Lost last week against TCU. Weird game, frankly. Weird game. TCU took them a while to get going. Never actually got going. Only scored 17 points. But Texas was never really threatening at the end to win that game, right? It was pretty much a TCU-controlled game down the stretch. Texas closes out with a road game this week against Kansas and then a home game against Baylor. One of the things that I find interesting about Texas, and this has happened the last at least 3 weeks running, but Vegas seems to really favor Texas. Vegas likes something about the Texas Longhorns that frankly, a lot of the other projection systems that I've looked at also see in Texas that I don't feel like I have, right? They were favored by 7 last week over TCU, and as we talked about on the program, that meant that Vegas gave them about a 75% chance to win outright. This week on the road at Kansas, I believe they're favored by about 9 points. Now, that's not to say Kansas plays much of anything on the defensive side of the ball.
Right.
And certainly what we saw from Texas last week on defense was also, I think, pretty good. They looked okay on that side. They should be able to contain Kansas's ground game, which is what Kansas is really good at this season.
Mm-hmm.
But 9 points feels like a lot. I don't know what that Baylor game's going to look like. They'll probably be favored in that Baylor game as well to close out the year. They finish out with Baylor coming to Austin. So you're talking about 2 weeks in a row, a 9-point favorite, around a 10-point favorite. And I'm not sure I'm fully in on Texas on the home stretch. I could see them winning both those games, but I can't possibly imagine a world in which I'm going to bet on them to cover. It just doesn't seem like they are trustworthy enough, especially given the level that Quinn Ewers is playing at right now, which isn't great. Too much uncertainty still with the Longhorns for me.
I mean, essentially, they've gotten worse over the course of the season. If we say it's not how you start, it's how you finish. There were a lot of promising moments under the early portion of the season when Quinn Ewers was healthy, and obviously the better of Hudson Card was impressive. He didn't always have his finest moments, but this is not a team that finishes strong in games, and I don't expect them to finish strong this season. If they are amped up for the Kansas game, if they are fully inspired, they should be able to shut Kansas's offense down enough and get going enough themselves with Bijan Robinson, arguably the most dynamic running back in the country, and a host of pass catchers who have gotten better over the course of the season and more varied over the course of the season. An offensive line, while young at certain spots, has improved over the course of the season. But this isn't a team that gels completely all at the same time every week.
No.
And certainly not over the course of 4 quarters against pretty strong opponents in the Big 12. And so you're looking at a team that underestimates how much gas is left in the tank, chooses the wrong tires for the wrong weather, and has the brightest, shiniest, slickest coat of paint, the biggest custom engine, and the driver doesn't know how to always use that little joypad that you use when you're driving F1, right?
Yeah.
That I just kind of know how to drive automatic. Is that bad? That's the issue right now, where they're not fully on the same page at any given time. And that's really tough to finish out a year when you're tired, when you're beat up, when your brain is tired after the way that they lost to TCU, where they give their all on defense. They don't get in the end zone on offense. So I see this team sputtering, even in a winning effort. If they beat Kansas, if they beat Baylor, whatever, I don't see it as a pretty way to finish out the year.
No, the Baylor game is interesting on a couple different levels, not the least of which is, even though Baylor has had its moments this season, Baylor is still well coached enough that they can make up some ground. Dave Aranda doesn't get outcoached that frequently. It happens.
We're in the shadow of them losing demonstrably to Kansas State
often.
and scoring just as many touchdowns on offense as Texas
It does not
did.
happen that often.
I agree.
That Dave Aranda is outcoached. And, we saw a game just this past week where Bijan Robinson was held to 29 yards and the offense sputtered. They were lucky to score 10 points in that game. So, Final game of the year, Dave Aranda may need it to get to, 7 wins. I don't know. Just interesting to me.
It's at home.
It's at home.
I mean, for Texas, yeah.
But I could see Dave Aranda putting some scheme together that can continue to bottle up the Texas offense. I don't know. Let us know what you think. We're at solidverbal@gmail.com. You can also sign up at verballers.com if you want to join the community and chat on our Discord server. The teams that we discuss here today, again, USC, Michigan, Tennessee, North Carolina, and now Texas, Dan.
By the way, you know what you don't need, as you mentioned Dave Aranda? You know what you don't need to defeat Texas or hold Texas down in some sort of important way? A mad scientist plan.
No.
You just need a plan. You need a mead binder and an active Bic pen. Neither are sponsors.
Not a sponsor.
Could be. And write down, this might work. That's generally good enough to limit Texas in a significant way in 2022.
Before we get to our guest of honor, want to give a big shout out to our friends over at the Football Ramble, Dan.
Ooh.
Yeah. Football Ramble. It is the UK's biggest soccer podcast, and they are going daily throughout the World Cup this fall. These guys have been around forever. I've listened to the Football Ramble for a good long time, since like 2007, which is around the time when we started doing this. Mm-hmm. It is the go-to podcast for soccer fans around the world who want to learn about the beautiful game. They're funny as hell.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
It is a good show. Again, they're releasing every day throughout the World Cup. They're going to have you covered from keeping up with the tournament favorites in Europe and South America and all the underdogs who might cause a ruckus in the tournament. Obviously, the U.S. is in England's group. I don't know if anyone out there had a chance to go and listen to my special World Cup preview that I did with Bill Connolly at verballers.com. But
verballers.com, in-depth, nerdy World Cup preview.
We talked a lot about U.S. being in England's group. And look, there is also this other side of why are they doing this thing in Qatar in the first place? Why is that controversial? The Football Rambles got a 3-part documentary series available now called Inside the Qatar World Cup. They traveled there. They met with the workers, tournament officials, soccer fans, journalists, the works. They've really been going all out in preparation for the World Cup. And even better, if you are just interested in football, European football,
yes,
the real football,
international football. Yeah,
you don't have to be a diehard. If you're just if you're soccer curious, Dan, want to learn more about it, the Rambles, your perfect World Cup companion, relaxed, personable. They don't take themselves too seriously. Just look for the Football Ramble in your podcast app, subscribe, and listen now. The only soccer podcast you need for the World Cup. New episodes every day, starting Sunday, the 20th of November.
Do we have is it Qatar or Qatar?
I go Qatar.
I know. I'm going to go Qatar, and we'll see who's who when the coverage starts.
Today's special guest is Chris Distefano. He's got a Netflix comedy special called Speshi Weshi. This is an interview taking place thanks to our good friends over at Spotify. We would encourage you to check out our live show on Spotify every Thursday at 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, called College Football Thursdays, where we talk about any number of college football subjects, be it games that are afoot, be it topics that you need to know about, be it coaching, hiring, and firings. We know we're getting into that silly season. Daniel, that does it for today's show. We thank our special guest for stopping on by. We thank you for downloading the show, for supporting the Solid Verbal as you have all throughout this college football season. Verballers.com is where you can go if you want to further support what we do. That is our Patreon. That's where you can get access to our special community, in addition to some bonus perks, not the least of which is early access to episodes like this one, as well as bonus episodes like the one I did with Bill Connolly talking all things World Cup, which I was like a giddy fanboy doing. So excited for the World Cup this week. Oh, I can't wait.
When's the first men's?
November the 20th.
November the 20th. November the 20th.
Yes.
Is who are they playing?
It's Qatar against Ecuador is the first game. The U.S. plays on November 21st against Wales, 2 p.m. East, 11
That's Monday?
a.m. West. Yes. We're going to be moving our schedule around so that I can watch this game. FYI.
Does it start at 2:30 a.m. Eastern?
No, it's
what
2
time
p.m.
does it start?
2 p.m.
Oh, 2 p.m. Okay, great. Good for you.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein. For myself, Ty Hildenbrand. Thanks again for downloading, listening, supporting the show. We will talk to y'all soon. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.